Hey, it's Chris Beyer.
Chris Bowling.
Brad Johnson.
That's
Going,
another Bottom Line Thursday. Hello, Brad.
How are we doing today?
We are doing
Good.
great. Thank you for your outstanding newsletter as usual. And it's that time of the month where we like to kick out a video. What is your first topic you'd like to discuss with the team and the viewership?
Very good.
Well said.
I would like to talk about a legal case, and I'm not an attorney. Gosh, you don't want my legal advice, that's for sure. But I think something that has implications for all self-funded plans going forward. Have you heard about this Johnson & Johnson lawsuit an employee brought to their employer, Johnson & Johnson?
I had not until I read
Not
it.
until the newsletter.
Until your newsletter. Yes.
So, and I shouldn't say comical, but I've got a fourth grade sense of humor, right? So Johnson & Johnson is a huge company, a drug maker, one of many things that they do. And one of their employees felt that they weren't holding up their fiduciary responsibilities to their employees because they felt they were paying too much for prescription drugs, and then hence sued Johnson & Johnson for doing that. So Johnson & Johnson also has a PBM, which we've talked about many times, prescription benefit manager, and they went out for bids, but apparently the employee felt there's too much of a disparity in some of those prices, and at the end of the day, it wasn't really benefiting the folks that work there. And so it's really starting this whole conversation now of, okay, well, one, if you have the opportunity to bid your pharmacy, you should probably do that.
Yeah.
At least look every so often, be a good fiduciary. And I think that's accurate. In this case, they did that. So then it's a question of how deep do you go? Now, granted, I'd say a company of, hundreds of thousands of employees probably has a greater bandwidth to do a different RFP than maybe a typical group around here would. But anyhow, just kind of raises some interesting topics. That'll spur the conversation between you two sharp folks here.
I know Mr. Bowling loves to challenge the pharmacy costs.
I do.
And you're right. There are some employers that have picked their PBM because they have to, because they're part of that insurance carrier and they have no choice. And then there's some that have gone through that selection process and things are working well. But you think about all of the new innovation that's come in the last year, let alone the last 3 or 4 years since maybe they did go through that. And then I think the third thing is, are those running, and that'd be us, and a lot of times the consultant running the pharmacy benefit selection, doing so in an unbiased way that's really trying to help the employer. And I'm not saying that brokers aren't doing that, but what's the motivation? What's the compensation model? Why would you pick one over the other? Is it truly for its cost and effectiveness? But go ahead, CB.
The biggest RFP I ran was, again, we're talking Iowa. So it was an employer with about 900 employees, which is, still a decent sized employer. And what I learned from some of my fellow PBM nerds is you create the spreadsheet of what you want to see, because the big three can spreadsheet like nobody's business and they will look like they are beating everybody's tail. So we actually created the spreadsheet of what we thought was important to disclose, and it made everything truly on a level playing field, versus ESI is going to create a 42-page proposal and you're just blind trying to compare one to another when there are all these graphs and everything else. Yeah. And I will tell you, Brad, that's the biggest thing I've learned is, if you can create a spreadsheet that you keep everything level, and this is all I want to know, it did help us pick the right PBM. Now, that being said, Chris had mentioned this in previous discussions, is sometimes the smaller PBMs are the ones that are really finding the most creative ways to drive pharmacy costs down.
Yeah.
It's not AWP minus this. It's not MAC minus that. It's, we all know 20% of the people drive 80% of our pharmacy costs, and it's not on generic. It's the specialty meds. So, not that again, I'm going off a topic of what this was, but I can understand how an employee is like, wait a minute, you're the manufacturer, you're my employer, and you're the PBM, and am I really getting the best deal?
Yeah. Well, I thought about both of you too, because, one of the subsets of this is, they're saying, hey, they only went to traditional PBMs. And I know you both have been way out in front of looking at some non-traditional things.
Yeah.
And, if that becomes the new bar, good for you, because you're already ahead of the curve on this.
We just talked with a client today. They have a very good independent small TPA, not a large employer, not ready to go through that process of evaluating those, but asked us, can you isolate these top few drugs and find a cheaper way to purchase it? And we have ways to do so without having to change the PBM. So it's a benefit for a client that can't or realizes the PBM is the fit, but they need one more lever to pull. Or it's that employer that has the self-funded carrier that won't let them carve out the PBM. There's got to be a way to do so. And that's, I think, going to be a great savings to them on 2 or 3 drugs that are really hitting the plane hard.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too, you think about if a group is, self-funded, but with a carrier that won't let them carve out the pharmacy. I think, as you both have found, there are still things you can do. And, this lawsuit, we'll see where it goes, right? You can sue anybody for anything at any time. But this one seems to be getting the press in about every benefit periodical we're reading, right? So it's,
Absolutely.
I don't know, it seems to have some teeth to it. And the lessons learned are, keep doing your due diligence, keep looking out for your folks.
Yes, that's the responsibility when you sponsor that health plan.
Yeah, great article, Brad. And I can't believe you find this stuff. So well done.
Yes, there's always.
I've got no hobbies. We know this.
Love it.
Good. Well, thank you,
All
Brad.
right.
Appreciate you.
See you next week.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.